Okay. Thank you. So welcome everybody to this month's Social Elements Live. Today I'll be talking with Phil from Create Health, and the title of the talk today is Trust is the Currency Pharma Should Be Building for Long-Term Pain Savings. So just before I launch into a little bit about me and a bit about Phil, I just wanted to let everybody know that this is a Q&A session. So feel free to send in your questions on LinkedIn and we will try to answer them during the session. Okay, so first up, a little bit about Social Elements and a bit about me. So my name's Lisa. I founded Social Elements in 2017. And we are a marketing consultancy that specialises in providing bespoke, strategic social media marketing services to the life science industry. We help these businesses to find their voice and to be heard online, and we build an insider's knowledge of the sector with a strategic, analytical approach to social media. We're results driven and we focus on working with you and your team to maximise your marketing budget whilst delivering an authentic and strategic campaign. We're a scientifically minded marketing agency and we like to think that our values are that we're knowledgeable, we have career backgrounds in pharma with expert knowledge of the scientific sector, so we do know what we're talking about. We're proficient in both paid for and organic social media services. We're also curiosity provoking. We look for ways to do things that challenge and exceed expectations. And we're constantly striving to learn more about science and healthcare. We're also strategic. We're thorough, observant, data-driven and results orientated, but we're definitely not boring. So some of our main key services, we have a strategic development service, which is a one-off strategy that we work with you to deliver. We also have ongoing services such as organic social and content marketing, and we also provide training and consultancy services as well. And then a little bit about me. As I mentioned, my name's Lisa. I'm a social media consultant and I have 8 years of expertise in organic and paid social media. My main platform of fun is LinkedIn, and I have a master's in microbiology from the University of Surrey, and I'm a little bit of a science nerd as well. Overall, I've got 20 years of postgrad experience in R&D and drug development. So moving on to the next slide. So joining me is Phil Blackmore. He's from Create Health, and little and large, global and startup, Phil's worked in agencies of all kinds over the last 20 years. He's won awards for his writing, thinking and leadership as an ad agency founder, and Phil's boundless energy is really infectious. His love of creativity is obvious, his passion for Lego and trance music bordering on unhealthy. And you can probably see lots of his Lego behind him today.
Yeah, I'm not in a kid's bedroom. This is all of my rubbish here, so yes.
In short, he loves what he does. And he believes that no matter what brand or sector you're working with, you can always create brilliant work. Phil's taken this belief to the world of healthcare, where for the last 11 years, he's led a diverse team of strategists, scientists, and creative thinkers, all of whom are hell-bent on helping healthcare brands see things not as they are, but as they could be. Please join me in welcoming Phil. You can also connect with him using the QR code on LinkedIn.
Well, thank you for having me. That was a lovely intro. It was proper. Yeah, it was quite nice to have someone else introduce me, like walking onto stage.
I know, you feel like a famous person.
I do, which, you know, for a redhead is a real accolade. So, yeah, no, very happy. Brill, I'm conscious that, yeah, we've got a super interesting conversation on trust to get to. So, yeah, just a couple of slides first on my business, Create Health. Shall we jump to the next slide, please? Yeah, so as Lisa's mentioned, yeah, we are a really diverse group of individuals made up predominantly of scientific thinkers, creative thinkers and strategists. And the one thing that I'm really proud of the team that we've amassed at Create Health is everyone's got got the same kind of desire, which is to make a tangible difference in healthcare. I think we've all got that calling and wanting to use our skill sets to make a very positive difference. In terms of what I suppose our value and our whole positioning as a business, we're really here to deliver ideas made for stronger returns. Obviously, I am a creative at heart. I think it's very easy sometimes when people talk about creative to just think about the kind of the arty side of things. Whilst we're phenomenal creatives, we're all about those ideas. And when we talk about ideas, that's anything from a big global campaign right the way through to changing the signage on an oncology ward. It's whatever the idea is that drives the return for our clients and making sure that that kind of outcome is met and positive change is seen. In terms of how we do that, we have a methodology that we've spent probably the last sort of 10 years developing and refining with our clients. It's called the Red Thread, and it really helps us and our clients navigate, I suppose, both these worlds of art and science, and making sure they're not seen as separate entities, but very much things that should work together. And we use this Red Thread to really help clients navigate a lot of the complexities that we're seeing in this ever-changing landscape that we're in at the moment, because ultimately we want to connect with the right people so that we can drive the right outcome and change. So the Red Thread, to be defined, is fundamentally a strong and distinctive strategy. It's unbreakable, and it's very much put in place with our clients at the start of the journey to get them to where they want to be in the future. And the reason we love a Red Thread is it's a fantastically well understood idea of this thing that runs through everything that you do. I think the origins of the Red Thread are Chinese, and it was a proverb about kind of this fate line, etc. But yeah, we very much use the Red Thread in our world to build consistency, which in turn builds trust, which is incredibly important in the world of pharma and HCP communication. It aligns different communication strategies and all the different bits that are going on and kind of makes sure that they're all joined up, which is a much better way to use your marketing budget. And I think for many people who are joining us today, we're all aware that certainly in this year, we're being expected to do far more with far less, whether you work on industry or agency side. So, having something that really pulls together that kind of spend is key. It helps you build that far better comprehension with your audiences, which we'll come on to in a moment in our discussion on trust. And yeah, ultimately it delivers those stronger returns, which is ultimately what we as a business want to be helping our clients understand. So how do we build trust as a business? Here's a little kind of smattering of my face and other such things. Yeah, we're very, very active in our community, and when I talk about being active, that's in many different ways. That is sometimes demoing products. We do a lot of work in medtech as well as pharma, so actually going and trying the product out and experiencing what it's like to use it as a user or to receive it as a patient is I think a great way to really understand and empathize, so that you can obviously position it better. Asking provocative questions such as the What If series that I run, where we're trying to imagine a brighter, better version of healthcare. Asking things that sometimes people aren't prepared to, having open dialogue, attending events, and again probing and really trying to hear from people on that kind of industry side to really understand what's going on. What are those barriers? What's holding things back? So yeah, we're very, very prolific in kind of the work that we do, and we do that because we want to be a voice and we want to build a following so that we can be seen as a credible authority with the guidance that we're then suggesting to our clients. Oh, we've got some more slides, have we? Christ, how many did I give you, Lisa? Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, just a smattering of some of the great bits of work that we've done for many different clients, and yeah, just very, very briefly, yeah, very proud to have videos that are streamed globally to help provide hope and tell amazing stories of people that have endured huge hardships. So that's Survivor Net at the top left there. Yeah, we've got 6 films that are still viewed by millions that provide stories of hope and optimism, which is something that's very close to my heart as an optimist. I want to make sure that people do have the information they can to try and live a better life. We've worked with the likes of Millennium FX and Pinewood and had custom Bigfoot suits, phenomenal experiences meeting, kind of people that worked on the Alien sets and stuff like that. Stunning CGI in the middle there for a kidney piece that we did, as well as really interesting ways of educating people. So, that water reactive ink piece at the top for Vagisil was a great way to engage HCPs in a really critical area of women's health. And then the BD piece at the bottom is was a world first. We proved that pathogens have a unique sonic signature, which was again a product that kind of took 2.5 years of scientific rigor and investigation to bring to the world. So yeah, in short, we love what we do, and this is kind of the impact that we have. And there's a quote from someone, not me, from Florence, saying just how fabulous we are. Right. I think this is my last one, and this sets us up brilliantly for what we're going to talk about today, which is obviously trust, and trust very much in the pharma space. So Fabrica Pharma, the second version of this is coming out shortly. This year's focus has all been on Gen Z HCPs. I'm really trying to understand their attitudes and feelings towards pharma, because I think there's a lot of people are talking about trust at the moment. A lot of people are talking about kind of the shifts in demographic and different kind of cohorts, etc. Millennials, Gen Z, Alpha, etc. This is a really interesting one, because I was quite surprised at actually how badly the perception of pharma is from anyone under the age of 30. And as you can see, there's some stats there that we'll come on to and unpack a bit more as we discuss this. But yes, this is coming out very shortly. So yeah, if you would like a copy, please do just DM me directly, and I'll happily add you to a list so you can get it when it's published.
Thank you, Phil.
Pleasure.
Thanks. I would like a copy, please.
We'll make sure you get one.
Okay, great. All right, so let's move into the main discussion that we're here for today. That's talking about trust and pharma. So I'll kick things off with a question about your white paper and the fabric of pharma. So where did that idea come from, Phil, to put together that white paper?
Yeah, so Fabric of Pharma, as I said, this is the second edition that we're doing. We launched our first one actually last year at Pharmageddon, Amsterdam, which is run by Paul Sims and Inpatient Health. And that one was just a general kind of, I suppose, trying to understand some of the behaviours. And the first edition unpacked the fact that actually a lot of the decision-making is predominantly made from a point of fear across the pharmaceutical industry. So we spoke to a lot of senior individuals across different countries, and it was quite interesting to see that fear was very much the thing that was driving how they were thinking and behaving. When we were at Pharmageddon, I had the pleasure of listening to Dr. Azmain Chowdhury, and also then spending some time with him afterwards. And what was really interesting for me with him was he is a Gen Z HCP. He's a clinical creator, amassed a fabulous following, does a lot of really good content out there. So if you don't know him, please do look him up. He's well worth following, as are many of the others around him. But what was fascinating chatting to him was he'd come to an event that was largely attended by pharma, and only by spending time with people from pharma did he suddenly start to have a view of the good behind what all these people were looking for. So he was quite surprised to understand what pharma were doing behind the scenes that were positive and good. You know, he met a whole host of people that had gone into healthcare to, like us, make a tangible difference, to help people that are getting sick. And he said to me, like, only by getting behind the curtain and seeing what's actually going on in the people do I suddenly have a really positive kind of view of it, because actually my view prior to this was that they're big and they're bad and they just make a lot of money. And I personally found that really surprising, because I was like, obviously if you talk to the general public, like your parents and other such things, they might have that view, and why wouldn't they see the headlines in the news about the profits and such pieces. But to actually have someone who is working clinically, who uses and has to obviously prescribe drugs on a daily basis, for them to have the same view that they're big and they're bad just really shocked me. So that was where the idea came from, in terms of, if that's what he thinks, who else thinks that, and is that something we should investigate further?
That revelation shocks me as well, as someone who worked within the pharma industry. I didn't realize that I know that the general public, as you said, aren't big fans. But I didn't realize that the medics also didn't really like us. So
no, and it's I mean, obviously, I wasn't clever enough to be a medic. As much as I love science, my skill sets were far more in colouring in and creativity and thinking, etc. So, I obviously never did a medical course, but I found it really interesting chatting to current med students, as well as those that are already kind of working in the industry, you know, at an academic level, there's a huge issue with pharma. I think because they are commercial, that almost is seen to cheapen the science, even though it plays such a pivotal role. But I was really surprised to hear about how many lecturers are filling students' heads with really bad views of what pharma are, and almost going back to the era of, you know, Dope Sick and lots of the OxyContin dramas that we've seen on Netflix, where, you know, they're really painting a very, very bad view of what pharma do and not talking about the good. And I find it really interesting that pharma aren't trying to tackle that head on, because if you've got people graduating who know no better and coming into it and then working and still not really understanding what pharma do and their value, that's going to cause a problem at some stage, because as much as they might be under 30 now and seen as the Gen Z group, they will be the decision makers of tomorrow. And I think if they wait too long, you know, it's going to be even harder to change those perceptions.
Yeah. And do you think there are any pharma companies that are actually doing a good job in terms of their reputation and, you know, how they're conveying that to the younger generation currently? Or would you say none of them are?
I'll answer that. That's a great question. I'll answer that carefully, in as much that I obviously don't know every single pharma business that is out there. And I think, again, it hugely depends on the therapy area that you're in. Certainly, my feeling is that the big pharma players are largely the ones that kind of control the narrative. So if your Pfizers and GSKs and your other big players are not doing stuff to counter it, then I think, unfortunately, even the smaller pharma companies and biotechs get tarnished with the same brush.
Yeah.
So, you know, I do think from my experience at the moment, the companies that are typically in areas like rare disease, I think, are doing a really good job. But I think that's because they have to work far harder, because actually in their space, trust is even harder to come by, because the stakes are even greater and there's less money to play with. It's not the same as working in the oncology. Exactly. Yeah. So I do think, you know, largely the brands that are working in the rare space are doing a really good, or the teams that are working in the rare space are doing a great job. I mean, AstraZeneca, I've been really impressed with, I suppose, how they've put sustainability front and center at the heart of everything they do. And, you know, knowing people there that have talked to me about kind of the sustainability travel credits and everything else, they're so aware of the impact they're making. I'd love it if they go further, if I'm honest. I think they're doing a good job already, but I'd really like them to start talking more openly about some of the great stuff they're doing at a corporate level to improve health outcomes and other such pieces. So it's a difficult one. I mean, I think, you know, by the very nature that trust seems to be lacking from this cohort that we've interviewed and this research that we've done, I think it suggests that no one's doing a particularly good job. But there are definitely green shoots, and this isn't about bashing pharma by any means. This is I myself had a really negative perception of them before I started working with them, and now that I've had the privilege of doing so, I just want them to realize their potential and be seen in the light that I see them in, because they do an incredible job.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I already knew that. Okay, so why did you focus on Gen Z healthcare professionals, and what about the other generations?
Great question. I think I was kind of aware of certain clinical creators prior to Pharmageddon, but hadn't realized just how many there are out there now. And I think that was probably, you know, meeting Asmain was one of the real kind of points for me. It was like, this is an interesting group, because they are long enough into their careers that they're building momentum. As I said, they are the decision makers of tomorrow. But yeah, I suppose I didn't want to fall foul of doing what the pharma group are doing, which is largely not inviting them to the table and not really seeing them as someone to talk to now, because they're not in a position of power. My view was actually be far better to start now and actually understand them, so that we can actually work side by side with them to affect change longer term. So that was very much the thinking behind it. I'm sure there are plenty of millennials and older in the healthcare system that are, equally as ethical and care. But as I said, this group really did feel like they weren't being looked at, which is why we wanted to really focus on that with our research.
Okay, and you've answered this a little bit already about the surprises from the research, but was there anything else that surprised you apart from the fact that the younger generation, the Gen Zs, don't have much trust?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? When you actually so we did this research, we did it all independently, just to be clear. So again, wanted to make sure there was no bias from myself or any of the team. So we got M3 to run this research for us, and we also got an independent group to write it up, so that we could have I suppose a clean piece of data to look at, so that if we're drawing conclusions and insights from it, it's coming from a place of this is just what was said, not what we hoped was said, so that it works for our agenda, as it were. I think the thing that is hugely worrying is that only sort of 30% of Gen Z HCPs, and we went out to over, I think we went to between 50 and 100 in total. The fact that only sort of 30% trust, as it were, and actually they use that word lightly, kind of what Pharma have to say, I thought was hugely worrying. What was more interesting as well, though, was that, you know, of all the companies that we spoke, individuals we spoke to, they felt across the board, 100%, they all said Pharma are just far too corporate. They're far too kind of, it's all very polished, it's all very corporate, it's all, I'm going to tell you what, it's too political. It's like, we don't believe it because actually there's no authenticity, which I find really interesting as well. When you look at a lot of these companies, they've been around for, you know, some of them over 100 years. And if you look at the original kind of credos and manifestos from the founders, there's a real sense to want to do good and care, but that's just been completely lost. You know, that heritage is not being seen, etc. So that was a surprise, that they all felt that the communications were underwhelming, relatively dull. Over sort of 2/3 of them all felt completely left out of any conversations, which was actually they were quite frustrated by. The other thing that was surprising is how entrepreneurial this lot are. You know, I think because they've grown up with social and the internet.
I was going to say,
they're all far further ahead with their lives than I am.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where the authenticity part, they feel Pharma falls down, because this is the generation, right, that's grown up with, you know, having their lives on social media and, you know, having everything out there and seeing everything about people. So whereas Pharma has traditionally been quite like reserved and secretive, so they're not sort of showing their true selves. So I can see why they would say that, Gen Z.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the really, and this is, I suppose, the bit that it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next sort of 2 to 5 years, really, in this space, when they do advance in their careers, because they are craving authenticity. And all I keep being told is, well, you know, certainly from a UK Pharma perspective, because of code and law, etc., you know, they can't tell us anything. You know, they have to be secretive for a reason. And I suppose one of the things I find really interesting here is that I know the code gets updated, etc., but we are, to your point, now dealing with a group of HCP professionals and procurement and all of these, and like these HCP, like these Gen Z people are working in, you know, Gen Zs are working as part of the groups within Pharma themselves, and they've all got similar kind of commonalities in terms of being purpose and ethically driven. So again, it's one of those things where I think things like the excuse of the code, etc., is an excuse. I think there are things that they could tell us. I think there are stories they could share.
I mean, they don't have to be talking about specific drug products, do they?
Nor should they be, you know, but they could be talking about what their purpose is, what they're doing, what they're trying to do to make the world better, given the power and the sway that they have.
Yeah. I mean, just, you know, looking at one of the most recent examples of, you know, the COVID vaccine and the development there, that, you know, and AstraZeneca's work with that, you know, that could all have been, you know, like, it can still be communicated as a really great, you know, social good story. It wasn't all about profit, was it?
No, and that's a really interesting kind of example, because it's one that's really stayed with me, because I always remember, there was obviously us all in the UK here going out and clapping for the NHS, but there was such a positive feeling towards the pharma industry, particularly Pfizer, AstraZeneca, etc. They were seen as the saviors when the world shut down, and I always found it really interesting that in that moment where suddenly there was a real positive feeling towards them, where they could have built on that and continued to build credibility and trust, they didn't. It was such a missed opportunity.
and like you said, missed opportunity and time. Yeah. Okay. I think, well, we can probably move to some questions from the audience now. Oh, there we go. So one of the questions is, why do you think Gen Z's, whether to say it's Gen Z or Gen Z? I think the English is Z, isn't it? So I'm going to stick with Z. But Gen Z's HCPs have developed such a deep distrust towards pharma companies.
Well, I've touched on this slightly already. I think this is coming from a couple of places. Firstly, what they have read and seen on the internet, and as I said, whether it's true or not is kind of irrelevant. They're reading it, so the perception is what it is, that pharma are big and bad, and I don't think pharma have done anything to counter that or enough. As I mentioned, really interesting to hear how negatively some of the academic institutions feel towards the industry as well. And I don't think and again, we see it's not just in health, to be clear. I think there's a really interesting issue with academia and industry, full stop. Even in our industry, the more creative fields, there's not enough collaboration, and actually I think that there needs to be more there. And then as we've said, I think because they're not being regarded as people that need to be part of the conversation, they just don't know any better. And as Maine said when he was at Pharmageddon, only by spending significant amounts of time with some fantastic companies has he suddenly got a completely different perception. And I know, many, Amgen, Sanofi, many have actually got him in now to talk and actually spend proper time with their businesses, because they want to build those meaningful relationships. And I think that's a really positive thing to do, and that's great for him. But that needs to be done on a wider level, I think, so that there is a genuine shift in perception.
Yeah, definitely. And I think going back to the COVID example as well, that they did work with academics, didn't they, to develop so that was again another example of where they had to, they did it, and that work was publicized, obviously for obvious reasons.
But, obviously, and look, I get that. I've worked in the industry for long enough to know why these companies have to be as secretive as they are, why they have to obey the laws. I mean, no one wants to get slapped with clauses, etc. That hugely impact kind of how they're able to operate. But so this isn't about opening the book and warts and all. This is not about, as you've just said, seeing everything displayed on social media at all. But it is about, what I find really interesting is that I don't see enough of them stepping in to change the narrative. And I think that's quite arrogant. Yeah.
And do you think there should be a more relaxed view from the code of practice? And do you think they are making things more difficult for pharma? Because as you said, they sort of operate from a position of nerves and fear a lot of the time, don't they, as well?
Yeah, and there's a lot of money and stuff at stake here. So again, fully and also, we all know that the moment something goes wrong with a drug, it's slapped across the media, and it's so we're dealing with people's lives ultimately. So we have to be careful. I would love to have more open conversations with people involved in the code. And actually really try to understand where they're coming from and their point of view. I think the likes of Rena Newton does a fantastic job with code clarity to really try and look at how it could be used, etc., and ensure that good stuff is getting through, but it's not falling foul of any pitfalls. But I mean, my outside view, and hands up say not educated enough view is one of, yeah, the code doesn't feel like it's working as well as it should or could, given the way in which the next generation are coming through and how they like to learn, how they like to consume, all that good stuff. I think there is a need for exploration into how else things could be done that benefit all parties involved.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I mean, I've got a copy of it, the ABPI code, and yeah,
oh, it's hefty.
and again, we've made sure that everyone in the business understands it and is trained, etc., because we have to. But it's one of those things that I found really interesting, that you then go in and work with a pharma company, and they've taken the code and almost done their own version of it that's even further stepped back from that, because they don't want to fall foul of any potential risk, which then makes it even harder. So yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think there's such a fear that someone's going to come after them. We've got to find the right balance that as I said, means that it works for all, really, because fundamentally you want your HCP to be as informed as they can be, and therefore kind of doing the best they can from a point of care perspective for a patient.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We have the next question. So what's the biggest mistakes pharma make when trying to engage younger HCPs? So what do you think are the biggest mistakes at the moment?
Super simple. They don't talk to them. I mean, I think interestingly, this isn't, I think, just a younger HCP issue at all. I think this is just generally speaking. I think pharma are very good at turning up and saying what they want to say, what their agenda is based on the script that they've written for what they're allowed to say. I still don't believe there is enough genuine insight and understanding and empathy for what a HCP goes through, or a patient, for example. So I think one of the biggest mistakes pharma is currently making is not spending enough time to really understand, I suppose, the human impact and human stories. Because I think if they did, that would only help them build more credible narratives that actually would then engage with this group. I think the big thing as well is, they're not waiting for a 200-page slide deck that tells you all the kind of data. Yes, it's important, etc. Yes, it has a place, but the younger group want to be edutained. They want education, but they also want to be entertained as well. So it doesn't mean using slapstick humor or anything else, but it's about trying to make sure that what you're turning up and talking about is interesting, it's memorable, and that's obviously something we work really hard at Create to do. But the biggest mistake is not talking to them, engaging with them, and not seeing them as an audience that they should be. And then when they are actually trying to talk to them, they're talking to them as they want, not really thinking about the end audience, which is, to be honest with you, is the first cardinal sin of any marketing or communication, is to not put yourself in the shoes of your audience and make sure you're connecting and relevant there.
I think that's absolutely right. I was just casting my mind back many years when I was there, and I don't think I got to talk to a patient or a HCP at all about their experience, or I mean, we would run investigator and site meetings, but we would go to train them into how to implement the trial, or what they needed to do. I don't think we ever sort of learned from them about what it's like to work with the patient in that particular disease area, or their challenges, and I think that would have been massively invaluable, because I was a scientist, not a clinician or a nurse or anything. I didn't have any background like that. So, and I think that's true of lots and lots of people. I mean, obviously pharma does employ ex-clinicians, which are really invaluable, but for the general operational staff, that they're generally not got that sort of background. So.
And I think, again, this comes down to how businesses are set up, right? So I think there's a real sense of, well, this is going to cost time and money, which of course it will. But I think that's the other big thing here that's interesting, is my experience over the last sort of decade has been that they're very much focused on quarter to quarter, and they're very, very, very kind of commercially driven. which you completely understand, given the sheer investment they've put in to develop their pipelines and everything else. And this is what I mean. Like, again, it was interesting when I've spoken to a lot of HCPs about explaining the process of how a drug comes to market, and they're like, "Wow, gosh, that's," and you're like, "Exactly." Pharma bet big and put a lot of money up front, and then they have to find a way to recoup it. So totally get
high attrition rate. Yeah.
A huge amount of things don't go through. So I mean, just to be clear, I've got no issue with these with pharma making money. They work bloody hard. What I find really interesting, as I said, is that they're not helping people understand the journey that they go on. And why things are the way they are. And as I said, and again, it's different in every single country as well. So there's so many nuances. I mean, it's a really complicated beast, this. But yeah, as I said, I think there's a lot of good stuff that could be discussed that wouldn't get them into trouble, that I think would really start to help build that trust with this group coming through, which is only going to be good for them longer term. But yeah, I mean, I've spent years banging on about long-term brand building, and again, it's still falling on quite deaf ears.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, next question. What have we got? How do we get pharma to recognise and commit to working with new or young HCPs rather than the big names and old guard? Interesting question.
Yeah, old guard. I mean, look, I think it's a really interesting one, this, isn't it? Because the reality is that the vast majority of, I suppose, KOLs are typically further on in their careers because they've been there, they've done that, they've been involved in far more. And I think what's interesting is, the rise of the DOL, the digital opinion leader, as the likes of James Harper talks a lot about, is a really interesting one, because I think typically they are of a younger kind of grouping. So, I mean, I think for me, it's about getting the balance right between kind of those key opinion leaders and those digital opinion leaders, and really trying to make sure you're listening to both. So, I mean, how do pharma commit? I mean, how do they recognise? I mean, quite frankly, if pharma just went on any of the social platforms like TikTok, YouTube, etc., they would see a whole host of clinical creators on there, which they could then reach out to. They're all on LinkedIn, as I said. They're very entrepreneurial. So just even that as a starting point to actually build a sense of who are these people of influence would be a good thing to do. But there's also
maybe that's work there for the medcoms teams within pharma to do a bit of reaching out and research, isn't it?
Yeah. But there's also a huge amount of events and roundtables that this group put on themselves because they want to do peer-to-peer learning. So again, there's an opportunity for, as I said, for pharma to turn up and get involved in that and actually share their views and be part of the conversation. I mean, I think, here in the UK, we're seeing a huge amount of reform when it comes to kind of the NHS, etc., under Labour. Again, a lot of these clinical creators are going to number 10. There's no reason the pharma company shouldn't be as well. Do you know what I mean? And as I said, there's nothing wrong with working with the big names and the old guard. They have a place, and they absolutely are critical to the conversation. But I think to not be hearing what kind of the younger group think as well is really interesting. And as I said, a huge miss.
Well, it's really short-sighted, isn't it?
It is, which I think links back to what we were just saying about, I think pharma need to be thinking longer term and not expecting everything to turn a buck each time. It's actually, let's start a program now because it will only pay us back longer term.
Yeah. So I've got a quick question before we jump into the others. So Phil, if you suddenly found yourself working within a pharma company, for some reason you've left Create, even though you love it, what would be the first thing that you would do to address this?
Which department? And
you can choose.
Can I? Gosh.
You're now the CEO of Phil Pharma.
Phil Pharma. Gosh, yeah. That would be quite a frightening thing if I suddenly did have if I was a CEO of a pharma company. I think there's so much that needs to be done. I think, the first thing I would probably want to do is really, really ascertain at a corporate level, what is it we're sharing with the world? Are we sharing anything? Because so many of these companies have corporate teams, PR teams, And I'm not clear yet on really what it is they're sharing. Are they there for, disaster and, what do we do if something goes wrong? Is it more about that kind of PR rather than the proactive, positive stuff and what have you? So I think I'd really want to unpack what that team and department are doing, what are the corporate kind of comms team doing. I'd also want to get, medical affairs far more involved. Again, I think there is a huge amount that they do, and then as soon as kind of the story around the science is done and what have you, it kind of gets handed over to commercial, and then it becomes something far. And this isn't true of all companies, admittedly, but certainly my experience has been it becomes something completely different and almost sometimes unrecognisable from med affairs. So. Yeah, no small thing, but yeah, I think I'd start with corporate and understand what is it we're actually saying, what are we telling the world we stand for, what's our positioning piece there, and then I'd absolutely look at the departments and trying to break. I want to break the silos. I think if I could break the silos, that would be.
That's what I was.
Yeah, that would be the single biggest difference. I think if I could genuinely get cross-functional teams working and rowing in the same direction, I think the quality of content going out would be far stronger. I think it would be linked to really credible data and science, but it also would be filled with insight around the audience we're trying to connect with. And I think there's too much working in silos, which means that actually they don't. I don't think the dots or the full picture is ever seen. And again, where these companies are so big, it's really easy for me.
They operate in their therapeutic area silos, don't they?
Yeah, it's really easy as a smaller independent to obviously talk about it, but. Yeah, I mean, if you're employing thousands of people across the world, it must be an absolute bloody nightmare.
Yeah.
But then again, you're only going to get the change if you say, right, we're going to do something differently, and this is it, and you give it a go. I think there's got to be more failure on that side. Test and learn.
Yeah. That's how we learn, like you said, isn't it?
Yeah.
Making mistakes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure what my first product for Phil Pharma would be. Maybe it'd be to make everyone a redhead. I don't know.
That would be an excellent product. Yes.
Well, I wouldn't be unique then, so maybe not.
No, true. Okay. Do we have any more questions? Okay. In what ways can Pharma demonstrate genuine purpose and impact to resonate with Gen Z values?
Great. Yeah, really good question. I suppose, to come back to a point I made earlier about constantly being told they can't say anything. One of the things I find really interesting is that, why can't they talk about programs that they're running to raise standards of I suppose earlier diagnosis in spaces. I mean, to your point, why can't they actually talk about some of the proactive, positive things that they're doing? So. Certainly from me looking around, there are areas of funding that are done to try and keep more women in science, which I think is fantastic, but no one hears about that. There are countless academies that these companies have set up that, again, and foundations, they all have a really good charitable thing, but I never see anything coming through from the charitable side of what are they doing? What are they doing to help mitigate impact on the planet, planetary health, all these sorts of things. So I think the really interesting thing here is there are stories around what they're doing to raise standards of education, access to medicine, the foundation work that they're doing, where again huge amounts of money are donated to things.
A lot of them are a part of like collaborative groups as well, aren't they? That they are paid to be sponsors of or members of, and you never really hear talk of that either. So.
No, you don't. And I think one of the other things that I find really interesting, it's something I raised at Pharmageddon last year, was because it was a really interesting talk about planetary health. And a HCP was on stage saying, I'm really getting quite sick and tired of seeing how many children are ending up in front of me with conditions that they weren't born with, but they're getting because of the environment they're in. And again, I thought this was a really interesting one in terms of, I think pharma, they're always going to make drugs. That's what they do. But what could they be doing to tackle some of the root causes or help improve some of the root causes? So again, I'll use respiratory. It's a space we work in loads. it's totally brilliant that they make medicines to help with asthma, COPD, etc., etc. But the fact that we've got lots of kids that are presenting with respiratory conditions because they live in areas of the country or the world where the air pollution is so bad, why can't these companies start to diversify their portfolio? Why couldn't they help to bring science in? Let's say a company creates a phenomenal air filtration system. Why wouldn't they get involved with that? Because one, they could still commercially make money off that, but two, they're tackling the root cause that's happening to help and therefore helping the younger patient. They're still going to need their drugs for when we get older and our lungs are just a bit tired, etc., and the other conditions, or those that are born with genetic conditions that affect their kind of respiratory system. So I just find it really interesting that, as I said, if Pharma started to be a little bit more innovative and almost a little bit entrepreneurial in the way they think about what their portfolio is, these are all things that, quite frankly, would align with kind of the purpose and peace that Gen Z have or Gen Z have. Because, my kids are, one of them is Justin on this, the other is Alpha. They are so aware of planet, and they are constantly thinking of ways and ideas. I mean, I run a Healthy Young Minds competition, as you know, which is about getting kids to solve some of these challenges. And yeah, I think Pharma need to start putting some of the profit that they make into this space, because again, it will only help their public perception, but it will also, as I said, it will still make them money.
Yeah. I mean, for all we know, they might be, but they're just not talking
well,
about
again,
it.
exactly. This is it. You asked me that, this is a great question. And this highlights the point, doesn't it? There could be some phenomenal things being done, and absolutely no one knows about it, apart from maybe a select few. And that's great. Those select few will have a really positive feeling, and there'll be great trust amongst them. But for the wider group, and I'm not just talking, this is less about the general public. This is about HCPs. This is who you work with on a daily basis. They should be in on some of the cool stuff that you're doing, because there is plenty of good stuff being done. It's just that no one's talking about it. And only by showing how you act, it's really easy to say words, but it's not what you say, it's what you do, isn't it, ultimately? I mean, that's what I was always told, and I firmly believe that. And I think we're not seeing enough action from Pharma, which is why the trust scores are so low.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there needs to be better communication within the companies as well, about some of the initiatives. Like, using my own example, I separately from when I worked at Pharma, I used to work for like a collaborative group, and they had sponsors from all across Pharma that would provide funds and expertise to help advance science in various areas. AstraZeneca was one of the sponsor companies, but I had no idea. Like, when I worked for AZ, I had no idea that they were part of this, So, and the same for Roche as well. Like, it just not really spoken about within the company. So that needs to be improved as well.
Yeah, and look, as we've said, there are so many reasons why none of this stuff does get spoken about, and this is not about anyone getting into trouble and getting their, having the ramifications of breaking the law or any of that stuff. But what I would love for anyone who's watching this from a pharma company or involved in advising is to start just asking questions around, okay, but could we do something differently? Could we start to talk about whatever it is? Like, it's actually taking that positive step forward and going, yeah, this is something we should have an opinion on it, and we should do something about this, because this is actually quite a big, I think this is quite a big thing on the horizon that is coming towards them. And yeah, as I said, the interesting thing I think is that every generation seems to get even more purpose and ethically driven. And maybe that's I don't know, maybe that's a young, naive view of watching my kids and what have you. But that's only, I think the morals are only getting stronger. Our view of planetary health and public health is only more informed. Therefore, this is something they're going to have to tackle head on. I mean, there was a really good report by a company called Cavendish, which I can happily drop in the chat once this is done. But it was really interesting what they were saying, because they were talking about this paradox of the fact that the public's perception of pharma is so negative, yet it's seen as one of the cornerstones of our country. The work they do is so pivotal and vital, but we just don't trust them. But we know they're really important, and I think that's such an interesting area to be in, because would it take a lot to suddenly change public perception? I'm not sure. Maybe not. Maybe it's about the consistency of how they turn up. As we said with COVID, everyone was applauding and saying, "My God, thank goodness they're here." They didn't carry on acting in the same way that we can see. Maybe they did behind closed doors, but yeah, I think that's again where we need to be looking.
It all comes down to comms, doesn't it?
It does. Communication is the key.
Next question, please. I think we've probably got time for one or two more. How should pharma balance compliance requirements with the need for more transparent and authentic communication? I think we've covered this a little bit, but I don't know if there's anything more you want to add to that, Phil.
All I'll say is that I think, again, compliance is such a broad term, isn't it? And again, there are so many different people and teams involved in this space. So it would be very wrong of me to talk about things that I don't have a full kind of view on. Again, I think this is one of the big things for me would be, and you touched on this, I think if the company sat down and said, right, this is what we want to be talking about, and they had representatives from all of the teams, so there could be a view of what the goal is and why they need to do it, and then an ability to very openly in a safe space discuss all the perspective of the people involved, so they could then agree a direction forward. I think at the moment, the reason you've got some people saying, I want to be able to talk openly and transparently about things, and then you've got, quite rightly, the legal team saying, well, that's opening ourselves up for all kinds of challenges, or we've never done that before. How on earth are we going to do that, and how do we navigate it? But again, it doesn't feel like, and I've experienced this myself with some of the companies who work, it doesn't feel like enough people, not all the right people and voices are being brought around the table. And I think that's probably what Pharma need to do differently, is not put all the responsibility on one team to say, make sure we're not going to get ourselves in trouble, actually get the whole working group together and also be clear on why they're doing it. Because I think that's the only way that everyone can be kind of heard and clear on what to do. Yeah.
So what do you think, so if nothing was to change, and things carry on as they are, what do you think would be the sort of the main risks for pharma in the next kind of 10 years? What do you think would happen?
Again, this might be a very naive perspective, but it is one that I do firmly believe could happen. I think if pharma don't act, obviously the trust is not going to improve. But I think they're going to find it harder and harder to actually sell their products, and that doesn't, again, products are sold on a whole gamut of different reasons, the efficacy, blah blah blah, profiles, etc. But we are seeing the NHS and other organisations all starting to turn around and say, certainly on a sustainability point of view, what are you actually doing? Because this is part of the scoring now. We need to know that you are playing an active role in our planet and that you are aware of the impact you're making, and also then trying to look at how you change that. So I think the fact that we're already seeing tenders have that as part of it from the NHS is also indicative of the direction of travel, because if these more and more of these bodies start to go, it's really important that we understand what you're doing from a purpose point of view and sustainability point of view, etc. I suppose the ESG piece, that's only going to trickle down to the decision makers. So, my view is that if in 10 years Pharma have done nothing, they're probably making a lot less money than they are currently, which is not going to be good, because they need the money to fund all the phenomenal R&D that they do into trying to cure conditions or find better ways of treating it. So, it's as I said, I want them to be making good money, because then they can put it back into the system and reinvest to kind of further advance things. And again, if you look at how AI is changing drug trials and development as well, again, that's hugely exciting. But these systems cost a huge amount of money. So, I think it wouldn't be a great thing if suddenly they weren't kind of making the profits that they are. But those profits need to be kind of used, I think, slightly differently. And as I said, I think it's only going to be it's an iceberg waiting to be hit, in my view. because these are the decision makers of tomorrow, and these decision makers will be across the whole ecosystem of health. So there's going to be unpopular opinion that I think is going to. I mean, the other big thing I would say, just even thinking about pharma themselves, I think they'll find recruitment harder. I mean, I've been really impressed, surprised, all of the emotions in terms of, a lot of the team that we've hired over the years. We've had people who've genuinely turned around and said, I don't want to work for you because you work with Pharma. And then actually we've worked quite hard to try and make sure that we tell the positive side of the good they're doing. And then some people have said, no, it's still not for me. Others said, oh, okay, cool, that's interesting, I didn't know that. And that's our side as kind of as an agency, so I think it's only gonna be harder to recruit really good, talented people. And we're seeing this across the board. I mean, there's countless stories at the moment in the AI space of, the likes of Zuckerberg trying to poach the top talent, and it's crazy money that they're paying for it. And you've got OpenAI saying, yeah, well, crack on, because you're not taking the really good people because they've bought into our vision, our purpose, and that's just they're just trying to make money over there. Again, that's some of the headlines I've seen this week. But it's interesting. I think the Pharma will fall foul of the same problem.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that, but it was interesting what you said about people coming to work for you, being put off. But that is interesting. Okay, I think we've probably run out of time.
I know. Where did that
go? Yeah, I mean, we've got 3 and a bit minutes left on my countdown clock, so I don't think there's time for any more questions. But thank you, Phil. It's been a really interesting discussion, and thanks for everyone who's joined. If you have any questions that haven't been answered or that you want to talk about offline, then feel free to send them to me or to Phil, and we can address them, or you can carry on dropping them in the LinkedIn chat as well.
Yeah, I think also if anyone's got, if there's anything that's been said, but it's like, you're wildly, you clearly haven't got enough information on how this nuance or something works. Again, like the purpose of these chats are about just starting conversation and dialogue. It's not about what is right and wrong. So again, if there's anyone here who's got strong opinions or thoughts on how things could be done, we'd love to hear from that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's how change happens, isn't it? By open conversation.
And it is.
Okay, well, can we have the next slide just highlighting the next session? Thank you. So then we're having a break for August because we'll be on holiday. But then the next session will be on the 17th of September with Kat from First Create the Media. Hopefully you'll be able to join us. We'll put the registration details up soon. But yeah, I want to say thanks again to you, Phil, for joining me. And thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks
so much. It's been a lot of fun. Cheers. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.